Thank you everyone for being here. This is our second speaker series talk as part of our Indigenous World Building and Solidarities speaker series here in Whitehorse, brought to you by Dechinta Centre for Research and Learning. Dechinta's headquarters are in Yellowknife, and we've worked closely with the Yellowknives Dene in Chief Dragi's territory for a number of years, and it feels really exciting and special to be doing more work in the Yukon. My name's Leanne Charlie, and I'm a faculty member with Dechinta, and it is my privilege to share this panel with my, she's actually my PhD professor, or was. Dr. Hōkūlani Aikau is Kanaka Oiwi. Native Hawaiian is another term that can be used by the state. She has called a number of places home. Born in Hawaiʻi, growing up in Utah, and then returning to Hawaii at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where we met, and then bringing her academic career back to the University of Utah, and she's now at the University of Victoria in the new and improved Indigenous governance program. Yay for that. Part of a stellar team at UVic. So if you have questions about that, Hōkū is here to assist you. I'm also really excited to introduce Kyla Lesage. Kyla is, you're gonna have to help me with this, Gwich'in Kwe. Gwich'inabe Kwe. Yeah, Kyla has roots in Old Crow and an Anishinaabeg background. She is, I don't actually know your full title, but a land-based education coordinator with Dechinta, and does a number of things under that title. Probably the wrong title, but
close enough.
Okay, thank you. And Kyla, you have a BA, and you're doing lots of exciting things on the land. I've learned a lot from watching Kyla work with youth and with elders, just sort of move between generations with ease. Kyla and I are both respondents to Hōkū's work. Hōkū's going to share a little bit about her book, Detours, a Decolonial Guide to Hawaiʻi. And our job, Kyla and my job, is to sort of connect this to the north, and as best we can, with Hōkū's help, of course. Yeah, so tonight you're going to hear from Hōkū first. She's going to share a little bit of a formal presentation. Kyla will respond with some takeaways of her own, and perhaps a question or two for Hōkū. And then I will do a little bit of sharing, sort of rooted in my reflections on some of the themes that you see in Detours that I could see applied here in the Yukon as we try and think about what a decolonial guide to the Yukon might look like. I went totally off script, so I have no idea if I hit all the marks on that, but maybe we should just start.
Yes.
Okay, masi.
Well, aloha everyone. O Hōkūlani Aikau ko'uinoa noho au I Sekonen, which is the neighborhood, the Gordon Head neighborhood of Victoria, which is where I now live and am raising 2 of my 3 children. The other child is back on Goshute, Shoshone, and Northern Ute territories in the place we now call, in Kokorni, which is the place we now call Salt Lake City, where he's there finishing high school because I didn't really want to move at the end. So it is a pleasure to be here in the Yukon, to be really far north. It's been a really long time since I was this far north. I was farther north though before, yes. Right? So I have been north, but it's been a little disorienting. And so I feel like that's a good thing though, because it reminds me how important it is to be patient in getting grounded to a place and to learning what it feels like to need to be in a new place. And so being disoriented, yesterday I was a little disoriented, woke up kind of a lot. was really just an invitation to slow down and to begin to learn about what it means to be here on these lands, to be walking beside these waters, in the shadow of these hills and these mountains, and the birds fly, and the sky, and all of those, and the ancestors and the beings that are also here. So I just pray that the words that I have to share today will resonate with you all and will resonate with the ancestors of this place who will know me as a possible friend, and that maybe someday I'll be invited back again because I have been a good guest and will continue to strive to be a good guest wherever I may visit and or live. So thank you for the invitation, Leanne, to Dechinta, for the ability to be here and to be a little disoriented. And I think that disorientation is also a thematic in our project, Detours, a decolonial guide to Hawaii, which I co-edited with my colleague from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Bernadette Gonzalez. She and I, this project began several years ago at a conference where we were attending all of these different panels, and we realized there was like a substantial body of really exciting work being done about and with folks in Hawaii and with Hawaii that were actively reimagining and describing the Pai'aina, the archipelago, in a way that offered an otherwise to the touristic imaginary that really dominates how we understand Hawaii. So Bernadette and I had been wanting to do a project together for a really long time. I lived in Hawaii, as Leanne said, for many years. She and I were raising our children together and being workers together and, spent a lot of time together. We would go on walks and be like, oh, what project did we do together? And at that conference, we were like, that's the project. We need to bring all of these stories together into a book and get this book out in the world. Duke University Press was like, yep, that's a great idea. And that's how the book became, at least was the idea of it was started. This idea really then was about bringing together scholarly work on tourism, but we wanted it to be more than just a scholarly or an academic piece of work. We really wanted to curate something that could critically deconstruct how and why Hawaii is a fantasy destination. Hawaii as the tropical paradise has such a tenacious hold on our imaginations, and consequently it shapes the everyday lives of everyone in Hawaii. But I think it also shapes the way that people who want to go to Hawaii and their interaction with a place. And we wanted to push back against this imaginary and center the emerging place-based work that was happening again across the Pai'aina. Next slide. Okay. So the book in this project was a way for us to both resist the dominant imaginary of Hawaii as a tropical paradise and offer an otherwise. Hawaii is most well known as a tourist destination, a tropical paradise to which tourists can escape from their everyday lives to rest and relax in the sun and on the sand. This image of Hawaii is so dominant that it's even hard to imagine Hawaii as anything other than how it is portrayed for tourists, as the postcard image, which is the quintessential souvenir, right, for most tourist places. The postcard becomes a kind of shorthand for this tourist imaginary. So the first slide on the screen is a kind of nostalgic postcard that harkens back to the 1920s to 1940s and the cruise ship era of tourism, which really was setting the stage for what would eventually become a post-World War II mass tourism once airplane travel started to bring people to Hawaii after World War II. So in this image, you have Waikiki Beach with the hotels, and if you look really closely on the screen, it's really hard to see, I understand that, but all of the people on the beach are white people, white folks, on vacation, right? And then in the forefront of the image is a Native Hawaiian appearing man sitting on a canoe, apparently waiting for, someone to hire him to take them out, right? On a cruise out there on the beach, right? So again, what we see in this, and then it reads Waikiki Beach, and then, a plane with the sign behind it saying aloha, right? So just this image already is communicating a lot of information about how Hawaii and this imaginary is racialized and gendered in very particular kinds of ways, such that Native Hawaiians, both men and women's bodies and practices are there at the service of tourists, and that the land, the beaches, the hotels are all created to serve those tourists, right? What is not there is a Native Hawaiian reality. Next piece of thing. I don't know what you call it. Click? Click. Click. Again, the way that these things are racialized and highly gendered is that just as there was the Native Hawaiian man sitting on the canoe waiting to take folks out on his canoe, probably the most dominant icon of Hawaii and the tourism industry is the hula girl. And again, after World War II and with statehood, this is a way longer story than I intended to tell.
You're going off script.
I totally have gone off script. It became the Hapahauli hula girl, right? The half-white Hapahauli means half relations to rebuild or build anew, relations with Aina, itineraries that reframe or instruct movements through space, or ideas of place, belonging, reciprocity that are not bound by location. The collection of contributions in the book are bound together in their decolonial vision and an understanding of sovereignty, breath, ea, as requiring work and constant action day after day, generation after generation, and to bring it into being. So what I thought I would do to sort of pivot towards a wrap-up of my part is to give you a sense of what's in each section of the book. So part one, Vahipana, Storied Places, is, again, from an Indigenous worldview, it begins with our lands, right? The lands are our foundation. The lands are often our ancestor, our first ancestor. And it's from that lands that we are born. And so we had to start our book with Vahipana, with place. And the person and the piece that I wanted to share, it's a click, is the work of Kapulani Landgraf, who is a Kanaka Oiwi photographer and artist. She manipulates images to educate about the devastation to the lands that tourism and development and militarism have had. In her work, in her artist statement, she starts by explaining that since 1907, okay, I had to reread that. I mean, I knew this, right? But I had to reread it today. 1907, sand from Molokai and Maui have been mined and shipped on barges originally to create the beaches in Waikiki, which was originally a swamp, and it was a place where the ali'i would spend time, but it wasn't a beach like we understand it as a beach now, right? That had to be created, and it was made possible by taking the land from the other islands and bringing it over to Waikiki. And the sand at Waikiki is constantly being eroded and always has to be restored. And there's all kinds of technologies that they use to do that, and we can talk. It's interesting. So since 1907, that's been an ongoing process. This image here, Pu'unene, flattened, tells us the story of World War II and how the United States Navy demolished this, took all of the sand from this pu'u, this hill, and flattened it and used it to create a military base that they put in its place. What she also tells us through these images is that the pu'u, these mounds, these sand mounds, are also sites where our ancestors would bury their dead. And so she asks, pu'unene, flattened by the United States military, that sand was then used to build a military base. That sand is also the place where we bury our ancestors. And then click the next slide. She asks the question, and you have to click it again, I think, to get to the question. Navai e ho'ola I naivi. Who will protect the bones of our ancestors, right? So whenever a hotel is built on the beach, they find burial remains, the remains of our ancestors there. And then there's a whole thing, and this is not just unique to Hawaii, this happens everywhere. And so I just love her series that she has in there, and this question, who will protect the bones of our ancestors, right? What is the cost of tourism? Click. Part 2, Hanalima. Again, going back to this idea that decolonization, the work of restoring and decolonization, it takes work. It takes active work. But this work can take many forms, right? Colonialism has infiltrated all of our lives in multiple kinds of ways, and so we need to be able to go at it in all of those many kinds of ways to deconstruct it and to break it apart. So one of my favorite series in this section is, click, the settler colonial postcards. These were, so when I think about the kind of work a book like this also can do, I instantly think of Karen Kosasa and Stan Tomito's Didactic Detours postcards. They are a set of 4 postcards that raise awareness of major issues facing Hawaii by using the icon, again, an icon of tourism, souvenirs, the postcard. In their artist statement, they write, quote, "In the art world, didactic art is considered bad art because it dictates the meanings of an image and limits the viewer's participation in the meaning-making process," end quote. What is so brilliant about their approach is that because Hawaii is so overdetermined by tourism and American nationalism, nothing less than didactic art can dislodge these dominant imaginations. So as a teacher myself, I love using the postcards in the classroom because they allow students to think creatively about how to speak back against power. And so I have 2 postcards to show you today. So this one, Whose Paradise? Again, this one of the warning flag, just again causes us to pause and to think about like what is going on here, what does tourism, the danger zone of tourism, and then click for the next one. This one is about invasive species, and they've basically put settler colonialism and tourists on the list of invasive species, right? And so yes, they're fun, and then there are too many more. I'm trying to be brief. Clearly I'm not, but whatever. Okay. So the postcards are one way that we can, sort of do this decolonial work. But then in other ways, click, is by literally restoring Indigenous land and water-based practices. This series of photographs are taken from an essay co-authored with Noelani Goodyear Kopua, Julie Warwick, Kalaniua Riri, and Hanahano Na'ehu, about the Keawa Nui fish pond on Molokai that they've been working to restore for probably 2 decades now. So Uncle Walter Riri, Kalani Nui, and Hano have been working to restore this fish pond. They talk about the fish pond as creating an Indigenous futurity, right? It's not just about restoring the way things were, but also producing an alternative future, right? So when we think about tourism, right, it's one of the pushbacks you get when we start saying, but tourism is so bad, is like, although people need tourism in order to survive, they have to feed their families, and that is all true. It's all true. Yes, the tourism industry employs so many people, and so many people are dependent upon it to feed their families. But what this fish pond also says is that there is a different economy that we could be utilizing, right? This is another way to feed our families, right? And there used to be hundreds of fish ponds that were connected to wetland and dryland taro fields. And these were just 2 parts of a complex Indigenous Native Hawaiian food system. So, right, we have other models for how to feed ourselves. It doesn't have to be just, tourism or the military or any number of things. Okay, click. Part 3, Huakaʻis, again, it's a guidebook. We need tours, we need maps. So the tour that I wanted to share about this one really is the Detours, Demilitarization tours that we were able to, the name of this book comes from, is a tour that Auntie Terry, Ke Ko'olani, and Kyle Kajihiro have been doing for a really long time. And it's a tour that folks go on that really raises people's awareness of how militarized Hawaii is. So this is a map of the Paiaina, and the cutout here of Oahu Island, where 25% of the landmass of the island is actively occupied by the United States military. Those are military bases, active military bases. And many of them are Superfund sites. That's how, I mean, the United States military are very, very, very messy people. And yeah, ugh. Anyway, click. So their tour starts at Iolani Palace. And Iolani Palace was the site of the headquarters of the monarchy at the time of the overthrow. And they begin there by talking about the Hawaiian kingdom and the process of the overthrow and occupation and giving folks a sense of that history. From there, they go to Halava, to Camp Smith, which is the headquarters of the Pacific Command headquarters of the United States militaries, and which oversees a good portion of the globe. So from Hawaii all the way, I mean, they oversee all of the bases across the entire Pacific and into Asia. So they have a big, huge footprint on the globe. From there, they go to Pearl Harbor War Memorial. So from Iolani, I think we click here, folks are they're at a detour, and the military come out and be like, "Why are y'all here?" Even though they're on public land, you know, like on the road, they still get questioned when they're up at Halava. And then from Halava, they drive down to Pearl Harbor, which is the next picture here. Keawalau o Pu'uloa is the Hawaiian name for the place that they all call Pearl Harbor. And here they learn about the the impact of tours, of militarism on the lands, and how, again, it's a Superfund site. Their tour ends at Hanakehau Farm in Waiava, and it's a place where a community is just working to restore the land, to bring it back to health, to grow taro, to learn how to carve, to learn how to make, buildings, and like we did in the past, just learn how to be self-sufficient again on the land. And as as the health of the people get better, the health of the land also gets better in that reciprocal relationship. So that's just one example of the different kinds of tours that are in the book. And I wanted to feature that because, again, Auntie Terry and Kyle gifted us the name for the series, for the book in the series. And click to the last section, Hawaii Beyond the Big 8, New Mappings. And for this one, I wanted to just end with...
So we were invited by a professor whose home was there to then speak with the people and learn about this place and get to work. They had us doing lots of interviews and archival research and things like that. But the reciprocity was sort of built into a lot of the courses that I took at the university. So then it started raising questions for me as I was transitioning home. Slide, please. About the kolea is traveling, it's picking up, it's breeding in the north, it's feeding in Hawaii. They have the kolea actually has a bit of a bad rep because it shows up in Hawaii and then feeds itself like literally fat on the aina, on the land. So Hawaiians started linking the kolea to tourists, because tourists come to Hawaii, feed themselves, and then leave without doing anything. So I wanted to, when I was doing my own thinking about the kolea, I wanted to imagine a different way of being a kolea, a kolea that is invited to feed, but then has a responsibility with what it's taking, right? So I feel like I'm still on that journey as far as what I've learned from Hawaii, what I've brought here, and then what I'll bring back and what the cycle will look like, or what the next Northern student or Northern guest or visitor in Hawaii will take back. So one thing that really stuck out for me from the book, Hōkū, and this came out in our conversations earlier, where it's both a call to decolonize, but then also this call for restoration, and the restoration of ea, of breath, of sovereignty. And I started to think about what that might look like here. Like, we don't have the term ea, but we have terms like it. And one that slide please, that I'm just getting more and more comfortable with is in Northern Tushone, is the phrase danki, which means the way of the people. So if you were to arrive in Northern Tushone territory and you were invited to be a visitor or a guest, we might ask you you could be a guest for a day and see how things are done, and we'll serve you and we'll feed you. And then the expectation is that you begin to contribute, but contribute informed by danki. So it means looking at what's happening around you. What are the people doing? How are they interacting with each other? What sort of values or ethics do you see playing out? Then your job as the visitor, as the guest, you have the responsibility to then engage in that kind of work, guided by this ethic. So in an effort to restore, let's say to restore danki, we're going to confront some major barriers right off the bat. And I figured, like, Detours, a decolonial guide to the Yukon, would very much start with looking at the impact of the gold rush imaginary and the resource extraction imaginary, this idea of, like, wild, exploring the wild, openness. We could go there, but the example that I wanted to share with you was one that actually hits a little bit closer to home. So my grandfather's family, my grandfather is from Big Salmon River. And they, due to a census mistake, the state thought that was his first name, Big Salmon, when actually he was just the Charlie Shorty from Big Salmon. So Big Salmon Charlie, my grandfather is from Big Salmon. And when I first came here, I don't know why, but I was looking through the canoe tours, like websites, and looking at, like, just how they talked about the land, I guess. And I noticed a number of times, slide please, that they would refer to Big Salmon Village out where the Big Salmon River meets the Yukon River, the Tagecho. They would refer to it as abandoned. So you can see, I've just pulled these quotes off a couple local guiding sites. It's too small to put the website there, but on the next one, we get to find out who else is saying what. If you could have or change the slide, please. I just thought this was really interesting. This banner just shows up. This banner, this banner shows up on one of the websites. We won't name whose website. For the Big Salmon tour. And I checked with Hōkū because I'm like, when you do this work of being critical of the tourist industry, and critical of these imaginaries that have been created about your homelands, do you run into any like emotional responses from people? Anger, frustration at, like, what you're trying to do? And I can feel it right now. Because I was like, people flipping love Robert Service. You know, he is a Northerner. He writes about the North. He gives color and life to the North, and people love him. And I'm like, well, this is wrong. What he's saying is totally wrong, and it feels scary to say that. to a community who has maybe appreciated his work in the past and relates to what he's saying. But I relate to somebody else. Slide, please. Gertie Tom, Northern Tushone elder and Northern Tushone language speaker, and she started the Yukon Native Language Center. This is one of her first publications where she gives the place names to her country, Big Salmon River. Okay, slide please. This is a genealogy chart that she has within the first few pages of her book. Look how many people are of that place. And this stops I'm not even sure where it starts or where it ends date-wise in linear time. But I just wanted you to look at the people that call that place home. Slide, please. There are 9 pages of place names shared by Gertie in Northern Tushone first, translated into English if possible, if there's a common name. And then, I don't know if you can read this. Oh, you can. Look how she describes them. I'll read you a couple. I can't say the Northern Tushone words. Sorry, I'm still learning. But she describes one place, the hill behind Little Salmon Village. Gertie's grandfather, known as, there's this Northern Tushone name, and Billy, was named after this mountain because his main home was there. Eagle Nest Bluff. The old stories say that this was the den of a giant frog. Another description, people came to these lakes to hunt muskrats. Another description, this was a favorite spring fishing spot. Another description, Fatfish Lake has this name because several species of fish spawn here. Do you see the level of intimacy? And this is 1 page of 9. And the fact that they're shared in Northern Tushone just also, and we have to learn to understand them in English and little phrases about places, just gives us a glimpse into the level of intimacy that Gertie and her family had of this place. So I appreciate Hoku's emotion because we're talking about something that is so close to our hearts, being erased, ignored, wrecked by people. And speaking of wrecking, slide. I got to visit Big Salmon Village quite a few years ago, actually. I haven't been back since. I was supposed to go back this fall, but it didn't work out. And when we got there, slide. In one of the abandoned cabins, the tourists had made a monument out of alcohol bottles. And because this is one of the stops that is advertised to the tourists, and this language of abandoned means, okay, nobody's here, nobody cares, then shows up as something like this. Mm-hmm. There's 2 things happening here for me. 1, it's garbage that's being left behind. And 2, the impact that alcohol has had on our communities for multiple generations means that this sort of garbage is actually a form of violence. And it sickened me. It took me a while. I was shocked by this. And I didn't know what to do with that energy and what was happening inside of me. And I turned to my cousin and I said, we need to take that out of here. We need to take that with us. And he said, if we see a moose on our way back to Little Salmon, we're not going to be able to get it. And I was like, oh, that's a tough one. But we took it. We packed it up and we filled the boat with 100 pounds of bottles, glass bottles, and we took it to the dump in Carmax from Big Salmon Village. And just in closing, slide please. I use this in my own teaching where I try and help the students think about their relationship to the place that they occupy. And it has a triangle with 3 points. You, the land, and then the topic. So if the topic can shift. Like in the classroom, it's whatever topic we're teaching about. But if it's like Hoku, a guest coming in for a talk, that's the topic. That's the thing that she's doing. There she is down in the corner as the you, and the land is this place that she's coming to. And we heard in the way that she introduced herself and the way that she shared her reflections on being here with us, that there is this relationship that's beginning. And because of who she is and the thinking that she's doing and how she's moving through this world, she's carrying it as a responsibility. And she demonstrated that for us. And I think that cycle of being in relationship to place is possible for anybody to do. And I like this in a teaching setting because it simplifies something that I think a lot of people say is too complicated and have the privilege of brushing off, saying, I don't know how to do that, so I'm not going to. Whereas this diagram, I think, invites anybody in to begin that process. So, Masicho Hoku for inviting us to tag along with you on this detour. We filled a lot of this time. If you guys would like to stay and ask a few questions, please do. Well, if you have to leave because it's almost 8:30, then that's totally fine. But because we're recording this, just know that if you do come up to ask a question at the podium, not scary at all, that you will be recorded. So you're consenting by standing up here. So, Masi.
Thank you. Can I just respond a little bit to what you were saying about especially that quote and how this work is incredibly disruptive. I mean, what we write about in the introduction is that so we want to inspire, and like I said, we want to provide folks who read the book, who read the book before they come to Hawaii on vacation. I have a colleague and a friend who, bought this book for everyone in his family because they were having a family vacay on Maui, and bought the book, gave it to everyone. They read it before they went, and it really did change the way that it informed what they did, what they didn't do, the conversations they had with other tourists, and it just raised their awareness of being in a place. And you know what? That's a shift. I'll take it, win, yay. But it's the book. We also talk about, and they had a great time, and they wanted to do more. They wanted to contribute more. It was in August, so Hawaii was just on the early stages of opening up again. And a lot of the land-based work and fish pond work that was happening on Maui weren't ready to take help, right? And so they weren't able to contribute in those particular kinds of ways, but did in others. And so we wanted to do that. But we also know that doing this work unsettles a lot, right? I mean, my response to the hula girl, right? But people feel so passionate about those damn racist icons, right? And so it is totally unsettling. It's intended to be disruptive. Folks aren't going to like it, and that's too bad for them. Because quite frankly, the only other option is because this is, I think, like you said, this is a violence on our lands and on our minds and on our bodies, and the people who have to carry it the most are the people of those lands. And we got to stop doing that. And I don't know, I just want people to be like, oh yeah, I don't want to commit those violences anymore. Let's find another way, right? Why can't we want that? Yeah? Yeah, that's what I want. Kinder, softer place. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Bobby Rose? Okay. Okay. I'll repeat the question or comment.
I don't know if I have a question. I think we're a person who grew up having a rational responsibility at a young age, learning and understanding land, and going into on the land program, which then I went into tourism by accident. I tried with my grandfather. But now I'm really stuck in tourism. Literally started a business. But where that led me to, and like I said, I'm in tourism, is that I was helping protect my home, which is, like I said, is like, pretty firm that it's going to happen, but right now we're in discussions of how that big picture will look, which I think is really unique. And yesterday, or was it yesterday? What's today? On Monday, one of the people who are helping with that negotiation was like, do you want to be a part of it? And I was like, that's a pretty stupid question because you know my answer. Like if you're going to be building something or a park, tourism park within my traditional territory, there's no way out of that because with the government we have to negotiate. So basically now we have the responsibility to see how, or not a responsibility, I guess we have the power to basically see how we want to have it feel as a park. Which I think is really amazing. And I really like this. I wasn't even gonna come because I'm leaving out of town in the morning. And I'm not even packed. But I got like holding off the Bible. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. But I think it's just, the way that I explain it to my elders, like before starting a business, is that tourism is not something that I don't mind doing it, I don't mind talking, but sometimes I just get sick of repeating myself. But it basically brings me out on the land to do what I love, and teach what I know, and being able to share knowledge and stories and ways of doing things. I don't go too far. I have a line of where I'm able to share too much knowledge, but when I see an Indigenous person on these trips, they're like picking up after this song, and they treat me like so much like different than other guys. They like sometimes they want to cook for me and stuff, and I'll be like, I'm the guide, I'm supposed to be doing that. And they're like, well, we're running land. But it's like such a difference, like to see Indigenous people on river trips and like have people who are interested in learning, but also changing the way that they act. It's like it's huge and it's mind blowing, and that's like why I like tourism, is because I feel each trip that I do like making a ripple effect throughout the world. And these people are coming back. They're like saving up their money in the bank every day. Come back and travel with me. Listen to me like every month, like reminding me of like, times we were on the river and stuff like that. And I just want to be able to like read your book and read what like you learn from over there, because I feel like when things change and our areas, like people are able to travel again, like the Yukon is going to blow up because people want us to be Indigenous tourism, and I just want to make sure that people in tourism companies that can really just responsible and take an action
Right.
towards like bringing more Indigenous guides on their teams, be more responsible out on the land. It's crazy. Tourism is crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people see me and they look at my eyes and be like, they're throwing garbage around. And I'm like, pick up that shit. Like, they listen to me. And I'm like, it's fun. It's like, it's this way, like, I feel like, with the power and network and responsibility I have, like, it's drove me towards tourism now. I'm like, working towards building up other guides, and it's not only for tourism, but to build up our community.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Lots of work for the tourism business in the north.
Well, and I think you raise a really important point, right? That, I mean, the kind of tourism that we're talking about in Detours is mass capitalist-driven, globalized tourism, right? And it's that system that we want to push back against, because there are other ways of visiting, right, that are attentive to place and the values of a place and how to act good in a place, right? And there are ways to do that. And so, part of what we're trying to do with this book is, and with all the other detours in the series, and yes, there could be one in the Yukon. Anyone wants to? Yeah, we would love that. That'd be super awesome. We would love that. Because someday we're like, we should be able to, visit all of these places. Although, whatever. Okay, there's a carbon footprint to that I'm also not want to advocate for, or either. So, we can like visit in our imagination, which might be better. I don't know where I went, because that was just like. You have to edit as you go. And now it's all on tape.
Yeah, it's great.
How this book and this work can help those that aren't already on that decolonization path. Because I already know my own people. There are people that are, they're in the system, and it's hard for them to see through the haze of the colonizer's view. So I appreciate any sort of suggestions towards that. Masicho Kunashis, thank you so much.
Masi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're speaking to is exactly why we wanted to make sure that we put together a book that spoke not just to tourists, because we recognize that, again, the educational system in Hawaii, the way that it's set up, and the way that, class structures are set up, and how expensive it is to live there. People work lots and lots of jobs just to barely make ends meet, right? And so we were really clear when we were putting this together that we needed to speak to a broader audience than just tourists, than just visitors, that the message in this book are also for Kanaka living in Hawaii who are working all the time to keep a roof over their head and food in their children's mouths, right? Who went through the public education system and didn't learn a critical history of Hawaii, who didn't learn that the overthrow was illegal, that people actively protested statehood, and that the legislature hired, what do we call them? A marketing firm to convince them to vote for statehood. Marketing firm. There's a book about it. Yeah. Right? Like, and used state taxes to pay for it. Right? And so we wanted to have a book that was accessible to folks. Okay, to be sure, my cousins who work a million jobs to put food on the table are not reading this book. But the kind of work that is represented in this book are places where, when I lived there, and again, doing, different land-based kind of work, made sure that they and their kids had an opportunity to experience those things. Until I moved there and started working with Kako'oiwi to restore wetland terraforming, my cousins and their children had never been to a lo'i. Even though there are some really quite near where they live. Because again, they just didn't have a way, they hadn't been invited into that kind of a space. And so this is a book that invites folks into a different way of thinking. Just as, when I invited my cousins and their children to different things, it was an invitation for them to experience Hawaii in a different way than they knew. And they were all born and raised there. I was born there, but then I was raised in Utah and came back, right? And so this process of restoring our relationships to land and to practices is something that's just ongoing, and everyone will walk that path at a different rate, and we'll have different opportunities along the way. But what we hope to do with this book is just, it's not representative of everything that's going on. It's just a tiny sample of what's possible. And if it inspires anyone else to do more, or to go and check out a place, or to go walk through Waikiki, or walk through downtown in a different kind of way, then I think we've done something good. Because again, it's about the ripple effects of all work that we all do. I mean, Leanne Simpson, who I think spoke recently, right, talks about, the stone being tossed into the lake and then the ripple effect of that kind of action. So what kinds of ripple effects can we have? Because folks are walking the path at different rates, and some haven't found the path yet, and we have to invite them to walk with us. Yep.
Hey, Masicho, for your questions. Just two things in closing. Detours is for sale at Fireweed Books, if you're interested. It's in the history section. Don't ask why.
It's in the history section on the top shelf, because my last name starts with an A.
Oh, yes.
So.
And two, a lot of complicated themes and emotions were addressed in today's talk. So if there's any other questions that you have, or any processing that you'd like to do, we have two folks here, Emily and Mackenzie. If you could wave your hand. They are hoping somebody comes to talk to them at this event. Any questions, anything that still you're mulling about, would like to talk through, they are here for you. And if not, enjoy your evening. Masicho for being here, and stay safe, and we'll see you at the next one.
Mahalo.